Hello, everyone. Welcome into another edition of Ville on the Ville. Today, got quite a bit to talk about. Of course, mainly it's going to be the NCAA tournament and the fate Louisville now looks at as we anticipate, are they going to get in? Are they not going to get in? And of course, their fate rests in many other teams' hands. So we're going to break those down, kind of look at the teams we want to see win, we want to see lose, and how that will impact Louisville. Also going to look back at Louisville's performance in the ACC tournament, and then some other things as well. Look ahead to the women as they anticipate having a very good draw in the ladies' big dance. Now, first off, I want to talk about the Cardinals, again, dropping a game to Virginia, a game that I really felt good about. I mentioned in my quick take, I thought Louisville would be the team bringing that effort and energy right out of the gate, more so than Virginia, just based on what we had seen the week before in the disappointing, heartbreaking loss in the Yum Center. But to Virginia's credit, as I said yesterday, they came out and really showed great effort and urgency, and they just always seem to execute so well against Louisville. And I'm going to get into some interesting kind of facts and notes regarding Louisville and Virginia, and how there's an aspect of Virginia that you really wouldn't think about, and how that's really probably winning games against Louisville more so than the thing you think would be winning games. But you just really have to give them the credit for executing, doing what they do so well. I did mention the frustration of how they play that physical defense, bump you, challenge you at the rim. I really felt like that game wasn't called consistently on both ends, noting that Louisville would go to the rim hard, Virginia would challenge it, and they wouldn't call a foul. And on the other end, several examples, really. I recall one where Ray Spalding was just defending very much straight up. The Virginia player dove into his body, fell back, got a foul call when really Ray was simply standing straight up. And on the other end, you weren't getting those kind of calls. So I think it just comes down to one team having that reputation and officials just kind of adapting and calling a game that fits that style of play, which you really don't like to see that. And I guess Louisville, you could say, was the beneficiary of a similar philosophy for years under Rick Pitino, when they were known as a team that would get into you physically. Now they would do it more with their hands and in the open court. And I guess you do it enough, you get away with it some. But I think Virginia kind of benefits from a similar thing now with how they play defense. But, they got the job done once again. And now Louisville, a win, obviously, or I think even a good performance, a final score that would have looked a little bit better. That's why I think those final 4 or 5 minutes really might come back to haunt Louisville. As I mentioned in my quick take yesterday, that was a 2-possession game of the smallest sorts. Jordan Moore had the rebound in hand, just lost it. Goes to Virginia, they score, and then that sparks an 8-0 run that pushes the lead back out. And I think Louisville just got very discouraged at that point. You saw them then do what they've done several times on the season, albeit in some games they abandoned it much sooner, but they just sort of abandoned the offense and just kind of started looking for the first open shot they could take, started to not score points. They only scored 4 points after they got so close, 6 points. They got to within 56-52 when Jordan Moore had that rebound in hand. Virginia scores on the putback, goes up 58-52. Louisville would only score 6 more points the rest of the game. Virginia, including that layup, would score 19 points. So that separation, you're talking about a game, if Louisville had just, executed and looked for decent shots late, you're probably only looking at a 6, 7, 8-point loss, and instead it's 17. So like I said yesterday, the optics of a 17-point loss, albeit to the number 1 team in the country who has been dominant all year, those optics not looking quite as good when they look at that sheet on Selection Sunday and are picking those last few teams in the big dance. If you'd only lost by a few points, or a few baskets rather, might have helped you out a little bit. So we'll see. Will those last few minutes come back to haunt Louisville? And that's kind of a lesson. Even though you might not think you can win the game, especially if you know it's late in the season, every little bit counts in terms of your image and how it's going to look to a committee of people looking at a blind resume and picking who they want to put in the big dance. And in terms of Virginia, and that loss, how is it going to impact Louisville? What does their dance card look like? There's very little margin for error, and they're one of the last few projected in. I think last night they were out as of the time that Middle Tennessee lost in the Conference USA tournament, a Middle Tennessee team that not that long ago had a pretty strong resume that you thought could get them an at-large bid. However, they've dropped their last 2 games, both to very subpar teams that aren't going to be in the big dance by any stretch. One to Marshall, a Marshall team that had beat them twice on the year, and then they turn around and lost to a sub-500 Southern Miss team. The optics of that certainly don't look good. However, it still sounds like they're going to earn an at-large bid, but I think after that outcome, you had West Virginia beat Baylor rather soundly, and I think that helped Louisville get back in. So as of early Friday morning, most projections had Louisville as one of the last two, if not the last team in the field of 68, going down as an 11 seed, playing in the play-in games up in Dayton. So we're going to see. How's this going to work out? At this point, it gets down to, you have no margin for error. Your fate is done. You're not playing anymore. So now you got to look at other teams. What are they doing? Are they winning games you wouldn't expect them to win and bumping their way up? Or are they losing games and moving their way down? Do you have teams stealing bids? I went through and tried to look at different teams that you might want to, cheer for and cheer against if you're a Louisville fan heading down the stretch. And what I found was you've got a couple teams that have been very good in their conference. They're the solid number one seed. They're considered most likely at-large bids if they don't win their league tournament. So you want them to go ahead and win it so that at-large bid doesn't have to be used. They can just get the automatic bid by winning their tournament. And those two teams are Rhode Island and Nevada. Nevada playing San Diego State today, a team that just beat them not that long ago. So an interesting matchup there. We'll see. San Diego State is kind of coming on as of late on a little bit of a roll. I think they've won 5 straight, playing very well, confident. They just beat Nevada, so that's a game everyone might want to keep an eye on tonight when Nevada plays San Diego State. Rhode Island just wrapped up a game that was very close. Into the final few minutes, they had a 2-point lead with just a few minutes to go, but they put some distance between them and VCU, so they get the win. Rhode Island, losers of 2 straight, just like Middle Tennessee to close the season. They lost, I believe it's to St. Joe's. That's who it was. On their senior night, Rhode Island's senior night, were blown out by St. Joe's at home by 30 points, a St. Joe's team with a sub-500 record. So that looks very bad. Then they turn around and lost to Davidson on the road as well. So they are not playing their best basketball, but probably still have a resume that will be considered good enough for at-large. So I want to see them continue to win. And they beat VCU today, and they will play again tomorrow in the A-10 tournament. Teams that you want to see lose, major conference teams that are still open for getting that automatic bid if they win it, but aren't going to be an at-large team. As of right now, Alabama, many consider them needing to still do some work, while others, I think Lenardi actually had them in as of Friday morning. His projection had them in as an 11 seed in the play-in games, but many others have them out. They're currently playing Auburn. They trailed at 10 at the half and have opened the second half, wouldn't you know it, on fire. They have already scored 22 points in the second half after only scoring 31 the whole first half. In the first 9 minutes of the second half, they scored 21 points, outscored Auburn 21-3, and now hold an 8-point lead, shooting a free throw and hits it, now up 9 with 11:51 to go. Now, you may not be watching this, of course, live, so you might know the outcome by the time you watch this broadcast, but Alabama has started the second half absolutely on fire. They now have flipped the script on Auburn, up 9 points nearly midway through the second half. So if they win that, they are in. That's going to probably put them in, despite the fact that it would only be 19 wins against 14 losses. I guess they're considered to have enough quadrant 1 wins, this new system they're using this year. That's the thing that's kind of hurting Louisville. It's helping Alabama right now, and they beat Oklahoma, who for some reason, despite the fact they've played terrible for the better part of 2 months, Oklahoma has a resume that is you can't damage at this point, so they're considered to be in as well. Very well may also be an 11 seed. So other teams, Georgia, I highly doubt they're going to go on a run and win the SEC, but they play Kentucky today. So you're going to probably have to pull for Kentucky just to go ahead and get Georgia out of there, because the longer they're in it, you just want to see those teams get knocked out. They can steal a bid. Georgia's one of those. Tulsa and Memphis out of the American are the teams remaining. The American has a few solid teams that are in regardless. Wichita, Cincinnati, Houston as well. Those teams in there. So you want one of those 3 to win the American conference tournaments, and Tulsa and Memphis want to see them lose. So that's kind of a rundown of some teams and what you want to see out of them moving forward. And Alabama now up 10, 54-44 11 minutes to go in the second half. So Auburn now needing to do some work as things are kind of opening up for other teams. Auburn, the number 1 seed in the SEC, although late, they've lost a few games, kind of tailing off towards the end. You wondered if that was going to happen. When you see a team like Auburn that suddenly, comes out of nowhere and has a great season, is that real? Is it a little bit, is it legitimate? I don't know. Now that we see Auburn over the past few weeks kind of tailing off, and now Alabama scored again, so they're up 12. So interesting to see how that's going to turn out. Now, I mentioned earlier Virginia and Louisville. Virginia has simply dominated the Cardinals. It's no secret to us. And Virginia's story is their defense. They dominate teams defensively, make it very difficult to score, frustrate teams, get them out of their offense, make them take bad shots. But against Louisville, I started thinking about how these two teams have played this season, and it's really been, now not that Louisville's lighting it up offensively, but Louisville, really the scoring, when you consider what Virginia does to most teams, scoring hasn't been the huge issue for Louisville against UVA that it has been for many other teams. And so I started thinking about what numbers, what averages does Virginia have against everybody else versus what they do against Louisville. And so I went through and looked at their scoring. They, of course, lead the nation in scoring defense, teams scoring about 53 points a game on the season. And then you think, well, Louisville, they scored quite a bit above that in all 3 games. 64 the first time they played, 66 the second time they matched up in the Heartbreaker and the Yum, and then their worst performance was 58 yesterday. But that's still 5+ points above the 52.94 average that on the season Virginia holds teams to. Now, if you take Louisville out of Virginia's numbers, that average drops to 51.9, so that adds another whole point plus. So Louisville scored at worst 6 more points against Virginia than other teams did. The really interesting part here was Virginia's offense, not known as a team that plays high tempo, only scores in about, they're towards the bottom of all Division I in pace of play and in scoring. They average 67.5 points per game on the year. And against Louisville, their average was 72 points per game. So very interesting. And then you think back, even beyond this season, looking back several seasons, Virginia always shoots the ball well against Louisville. Now, why is that? Is it, the hard screen action they run? They're not taking wide open shots all the time, but they always seem to hit shots against Louisville. So how is it that Louisville's defending them? You start to think, if they were to play again, which highly doubtful that they're going to do it this year, but let's say Louisville goes on a miracle run and they're in the same region and they meet up in the Sweet 16 or Elite 8, how should Louisville approach that game? Do you worry about Virginia's defense, or do you start to get concerned about your defense against Virginia, stopping them from shooting the ball so well, being so efficient? Because, again, they're averaging 5 more points a game, over 5 more points a game against you than they score against everybody else on the season, while you scored 10+ more points per game than everybody else scored against Virginia. If you take Louisville out of Virginia's average, like I said, they gave up just 51.9 points to opposing teams. Louisville scored an average of 62.7 points against Virginia. So scoring, while that's not a huge number against Virginia, that's quite a bit better than everybody else is doing against the Cavaliers. So I just thought that was very interesting that, Virginia, that's where they start defensively, but against Louisville, their offense has just been so darn efficient. You wonder if Louisville faces them again, maybe should they go about things a little different? Can we do something defensively that disrupts them a little bit more, that gives them trouble? And you can go ahead and mark Alabama down. They are now up 17 points. They have already scored more points in the second half than they scored in the entire first half. They're up 63-46 on Auburn. So the Tigers have absolutely sunk in the second half. Alabama playing great basketball. Very confident now you can punch their ticket. So now, as I said, in Lenardi's projection, they were already in. This probably pushes Louisville. I think some projections had Louisville as the second to last out. So now they're probably on most projections the last team in the field. So now we go back to talking about the Rhode Islands and the Nevadas winning their conference tournament. That's going to be paramount for Louisville getting in. But back to what I was talking about in Virginia. Let's say they played again. What can Louisville do defensively to maybe disrupt them, make them take different, difficult shots, make somebody else take shots? I don't know. I just found it very interesting when I started thinking about the numbers that Virginia has put up offensively against Louisville, because you think of Virginia, it's always their defense, their defense, their defense. But, in particular, they're always efficient because they play at such a slow pace. They have to be efficient. But against Louisville, it just seems like they're even more so. Seems to always shoot better than 50% against the Cardinals, and we certainly saw that again yesterday in the ACC tournament. So we will sit back and wait for Selection Sunday. I'll probably take a little bit of a break until then, may drop in a quick take Sunday night as we look at the draw. If Louisville gets in, I may drop a quick take if it looks like some events happen before Selection Sunday. That means Louisville's probably out. But then we have another team that we don't have to worry about their fate, and that's the women. They are riding high. They've locked up the number 1 seed, most likely in the region that will play the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 rounds in Lexington. We will have to wait till Monday's selection show for the women to see if they've done that. But double ACC titles, a fantastic year. Jeff Walz and the women have been really from start to finish. Now, I have expressed some concern with their offensive efficiency and consistency, but we saw against the elite team, Notre Dame, they brought it. They played very well from start to finish, so that was good to see heading in to the NCAA tournament. So it's going to come down to matchups. Who are they going to get as that 2 seed in the region? Has Baylor moved up? Where is Mississippi State since they lost in the SEC tournament? You would think that the number 1 seeds are obviously Louisville and UConn are locks. Outside of that, did South Carolina slide up and steal one? Is Mississippi State still considered a 1 seed? Is Baylor going to get up in there? So you've got, 5, maybe 6 teams vying for those 4 with 2 of those already locked up. So I think it's going to come down to that 2 seed. Who's it going to be? What sort of matchup is that going to be for the women? But the good thing is I'm very, very confident they're going to get the Lexington region and have a sound home court advantage down in Rupp Arena. So we'll see what that draw will be as the women await that draw in the women's tournament. We'll find that out Monday night when they reveal that draw for the women's big dance. But just a fantastic season. Jeff Walz establishing himself as one of the top coaches. I mean, Gino's at the top of the mountain. No one's going to get there. But then now I think Jeff Walz is just right below him. And if he continue this recruiting train, he's really gotten it going now these past couple seasons. If he keeps that going, a couple more years of good recruiting classes, can he build that arsenal that allows him to consistently challenge UConn at the top of the women's game? So Monday will be interesting to see where the women end up. One other note I want to get to, obviously the baseball team, speaking of riding high, they're still undefeated, 12-0. They kick off ACC play this weekend at the Pat against North Carolina, a nationally ranked Carolina team. Don't have a great record, but again, given that it's baseball, they're going to allow some time before you really drop a team in the rankings. But very pivotal, getting off to a good start in conference. They have bumped this start up. It was going to be a Friday evening start, the first of the season, but weather coming in the way it is this time of year, they've started it now at 4. It'll be first pitch here in just over an hour down to Jim Patterson. So interesting to see how Louisville's going to start conference play. 12-0, fantastic start after last season's 19-0 record start. They get off to another double-digit wins before they face a loss here. Now at 12-0, and see if we can get kicked off in ACC play tonight against Carolina. And that would certainly be good if you can win that first series. Again, when you get into conference play, you forget winning every game. You just want to win every series. So the Friday game is always pivotal to put you ahead of the 8 ball there, or ahead of the game, just needing to capture one of the remaining weekend. But now the weather this weekend is going to be a little bit sketchy, I think, as well. So the first pitch times could be adjusted. I think both of them on Saturday and Sunday are already early. So, I don't know if the weather comes in at certain times, if they move it up even earlier, if they're going to push it back. So if you're wanting to head out to Jim Patterson to catch some action, keep an eye on the weather and on the Twitter feed from UVO Baseball to see if they might make adjustments, as they had to today for the baseball game against North Carolina. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of Ville on the Ville. If you've tuned in, thank you very much. Hit me on Twitter. Give me some feedback. Eventually, I want to turn this into something that's interactive. I've mentioned that several times. I just couldn't do it today due to some other things I've got to get to. But that's the goal for this, the way I do this. I do my little quick videos on Twitter. I'm going to continue to do those on a regular basis. This will be more of a maybe weekly or bi-weekly basis, but I do want to get it to where it's interactive. If you're able to, to tune in, check it out, send a question, send a comment, go back and forth. I think that is where this could be really more enjoyable for everybody versus me just sitting here talking. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of Ville on the Ville. I want to thank you for tuning in, and as always, go Cards.